MMA is tough. Pretty much everyone knows that. Players are almost always badly injured by the end of a bout, and Kamaru Usman's fight this month was no exception. Unfortunately, he brought his daughter to the ring, and she didn't take his KO lightly. Now, in response to that, Conor McGregor has weighed in on the matter of bringing family ringside. We'll be covering that and more in today's video. First up, McGregor responds to Usman's defeat. Kamaru Usman, former welterweight UFC champion, was recently defeated at UFC278 by Leon. It was an intense fight that headlined the event, lasting a total of 5 rounds before concluding, but conclude it did, and in spectacular fashion, with Usman being knocked out with a devastating blow by Edwards. The blow was a hard kick to the head that left Usman knocked out cold on the canvas, and it shocked fans and pundits around the world. This wasn't the first time that someone suffered a KO, and it certainly won't be the last, but this knockout was shocking for more than one reason. Of course, there's the fact that Usman is a fan favorite that hasn't lost a single bout in over 8 years, but there's another reason why people are talking about the conclusion. Usman had made the decision to bring his 8-year-old daughter to the arena, and when Usman was knocked out, she couldn't handle it. It's reported that she had to be carried away crying her eyes out. It isn't surprising that Conor McGregor, another huge UFC talent, was watching closely, and it's doubly unsurprising that he had thoughts on the matter that he just had to get out to the public. The main matter he wanted to talk about was obviously the unfortunate incident with Usman's daughter, and he expressed his feelings about it on Twitter, as he usually does. Next, McGregor's feelings. McGregor's rants on Twitter are often heated, taking shots at pretty much everyone and everything. He's constantly trying to get people hyped up. It's all part of his image. But this time his tweet was a bit more somber and thoughtful than his standard fare. His tweet was in response to another by Mike Bohn, the athletic director of the University of Southern California. Bohn had said that he'd witnessed Usman's daughter being carried out of the arena floor by one of Usman's team members. She was bawling, and Bohn was saddened by the sight. McGregor responded by saying that he felt that deeply as well. He then took the time to express his thoughts on bringing family to the arena, as this was a great example of the negative side of that. In Conor's opinion, fighters shouldn't bring their family to a fight at all, especially children. It's a grueling sport that leaves fighters bloodied and many times incapacitated. That would definitely not be easy for children to stomach, let alone those who have their parents being beaten bloody. Conor said that this was different fighting, likely referring to other sports such as wrestling that are more appropriate for younger viewers. UFC and MMA in general are raw displays of power, and that comes at a cost for the fighters. Having your child witness the consequences of your profession isn't always the best thing for them, and that's where Conor is coming from. Thirdly, speaking from experience. It's easy to express opinions on a topic without having experienced the context yourself. To say you think it's better to do one thing and not the other without having experienced both is myopic at best, and at worst, it's arrogant. But in a rare moment of sincerity, McGregor was neither. In his tweet, he added that he's done both sides of this, having brought his own family to the ring a few times, and he's found that going into the arena solo is best. Just last January, the Notorious brought his family to the arena with him when he made his return to the octagon to face Dustin Poirier. Though he put up a good fight, and both he and his family were proud of his efforts, he was ultimately knocked out. It was one of the most noteworthy defeats that he'd suffered in his career, and having his family there might have made it more difficult to swallow. Hearing that Usman's child had to be taken away from the arena only cemented his beliefs in regards to bringing family to the ringside. After saying that it's best to go alone, he added that you can see family again after the fighting is done, concluding with the statement that he'll be going forward that way himself in the future. It's refreshing to see McGregor so sincere on social media. It's just unfortunate that it took something like this to bring that out. Lastly, Kamaru's fight. We've been going on about McGregor's response to what happened after the fight, but we think that the fight itself deserves some attention. It's one of the biggest that's taken place in the past few years, especially considering that Kamaru has had a clean sheet ever since his debut at the UFC in 2015. He picked up the welterweight championship title back in 2019, and since then, he's defended it 5 times against the promotion's biggest and best. He looked like he was going to make it a 6th that night at UFC 278. By the end of the 4th round, everyone was certain that he was comfortably leading the fight. The commentators were going on about how Edwards should be proud of lasting 25 minutes with the reigning champion, one of the best the sport's ever seen. The last round was just seen as a formality, and even Edwards seemed to think so. Din Thomas said that he was broken and that he was clearly embarrassed by his own performance. But in a sudden movement, followed by a quick cracking sound, Usman was laid flat. He'd been struck at the head by a swift motion of Edwards' left leg. It was one of the cleanest knockouts audiences could have ever hoped to see, and it was all from a man that no one had any expectations. And that was it. It was 4 rounds of domination, ended by just one moment, shifting the title to Edwards. Now, in other news. First up, Zabit reveals reason for retirement. Before June, Zabit Magomedsharipov was considered a top prospect at 145 pounds. Fans of the sport were hyped to see how far the Russian could fly, with many considering him a future champion. But when June rolled around, Zabit announced that he was calling it quits at just the age of 31. 2021. Back then, it was reported that he'd done so because of lingering health problems and a desire to take on a different career path. But in a recent press conference in Russia, he revealed that there were other things going on. Zabit then cited a different reason for why he retired from the UFC. He said that the primary reason for his leaving was that he wasn't able to fight. He wanted a shot at the title, but they just didn't give it to him. He went further by saying that the organization had promised him one thing and then did another, which was obviously really discouraging, and it's what angered him and led him to leave. He was asked if he was considering a return to the sport or if it was possible in the future, but Zabit just said that his time in the octagon had passed. He doesn't have such a desire. However, he added that there could be a wish, but he'd have to think hard about returning. He's still very much in his prime, so if he wanted to, he could very easily return to the fight. Next, Rockhold explains the reason for fatigue. Luke Rockhold recently went up against Paulo Costa at UFC 278, putting up a decent performance in the bout. However, fans quickly noticed that he was incredibly tired as he stood in the octagon. Rockhold took to the MMA Hour to talk about the fight, and he explained that he was definitely fatigued when he entered the arena. He said that he thinks the altitude was a big factor in that, as the venue for the fight was Salt Lake City, which is at a higher altitude than the 37-year-old is used to. He also cited the first round as having a big effect on the rapid fatigue that set in. Costa had gotten a takedown and in a quick flurry of punches had broken Rockhold's nose, leaving him to breathe out of his mouth. Lastly, Cormier on Chimaev. UFC legend Daniel Cormier recently spoke on Khamzat Chimaev's position in the UFC ahead of his fight against Nate Diaz at UFC 279. He believes that he's in a particularly tough spot because of Usman's takedown by Edwards. Chimaev was in line for a title shot, which would have been possible if he defeated Diaz. Edwards and Usman are set to have a rematch now, so the future is uncertain for Chimaev. Cormier thinks that he'll have to fight one more before he gets a title shot. That's a wrap for this video. Do you agree with McGregor's perspective on family spectating bouts? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.